I hereby call to order the meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on April 12, 2023 at 7 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. A reminder that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitments to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? The next item is Student of the Month, and I'm going to hand it over to Narissa.
Sorry, I've got to get the list of reasons open because I did not. Oh, you have it right in front of you. Okay, thank you. So the Student of the Month is definitely one of our favorite things for school committee. It was started in 2019, and it allows the committee and the district to honor some of our exemplary students on a monthly basis. So it's K through 12 students, pre-K through 12 students technically, although we've never had a pre-K student that's qualified for it. Nominations are made in 5 different categories. It can be made in service to fellow students, teachers, or community, dedication, determination, and persistence in the face of obstacles, attitude toward learning and determination, high achievement in academics, athletics, or performing arts, or significant improvement in academics, athletics, and performing arts. On a monthly basis, selections are made by the chair of the school committee, the superintendent, and 1 member of the policy and advocacy subcommittee. And I'm assuming, is Mr. Kelly talking tonight? Ms. Perkins? Excellent, thank you. Would you come up and tell us about Matt Soros, the April 2023 Student of the Month, please? Thank you.
Okay. I'm very pleased to be here to be able to speak with you all today to brag about this awesome young man. Matt is a stellar student, and he's truly admired by his teachers and peers. But I would like to share a story with you that revealed Matt's character to me, which is why I nominated him. At the end of the last school year, I shared something on my coaching social media. It said if everyone would strive to be the captain of their teams as opposed to the MVP, we would have a lot better teams. Matt was quick to respond, saying that so many people, including himself, were hoping to be captain of the football team this year. I pushed back and I asked, well, you can't all be captain, so what's going to happen to those people if they're not captains? Are they still going to work hard, and are they still going to be leaders for their team? Without hesitation, Matt told me he'd be running for captain, but regardless, wanted to lead his team and win. I reiterated the fact that he could do something every single day to make himself a better football player and a better leader, and asked what he was doing with his time off. Matt wasn't the person who would yes me to death and have a one-sided conversation until I stopped talking about it. And when I told him I would be expecting to hear from him, I was met with a quick, "You will, don't worry." Now, as someone who's been a coach for 5 years now, I've had this conversation with more athletes than I can count, and all of them have done the same. Yep, okay, coach, yep, I got it. Oh, that makes sense, yep. But this time it was different. Now, we all know that teaching and coaching isn't for the money and fame, but it's most certainly for people like Matt. The next morning, I had a message on my coaching social media account. First day of my workout program. The next day. Today I worked out, I'll let you know what I do tomorrow. The next day, I worked out and I made sure not to let my ego get in the way, so I challenged myself, but not to the point where I was failing reps. I'm sure you know where the rest of this is going. So summer ensued, and during Triton's summer athletic program, I had the opportunity to work with many athletes, most of them being our football players. Not only was Matt continuing his daily accountability messages and present leading his peers every day, he also was the athlete that found all of the coaches at the end of a workout and fist bumped us and thanked us. Football season arrived, and Matt was not captain. But he led his team by example and truly rose to the occasion every time his name was called. He finished the season as arguably one of the most improved players and athletes, and he was named the team's unsung hero. When I nominated Matt for this recognition in October, it was when I sat with him and reviewed some of his essays for college, and I read this. The opportunity to grow through adversity with peers from the 3 towns of the Triton District during my high school career have helped me in developing my philosophy to belonging to things with greater meaning beyond myself. Seeing adversity as an opportunity and having developed a philosophy of belief in things greater than oneself leave no obstacle too great for Matt to conquer in his future. He will shine as an engineering student and equally phenomenal member of the football team at WPI next year. And the value he added to the lives of those around him will leave a lasting impression here at Triton for years to come. So I think I agree with everybody here that he is well deserving and congratulate him. Thank you.
Next item is the oral communications from the public. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during the public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee? The next item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains 2 donations tonight, 14 iPads with Apple Care for Salisbury Elementary kindergarten students from the Salisbury PTA, a scoreboard including installation and temporary fencing for around the varsity and JV softball fields by the Triton School softball boosters. There are no planning approval or final approval requests this month for overnight or out-of-state field trips. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Because I made a mistake. Matt Landers is remote, so any votes we take tonight will be a roll call vote. So any discussion? All those in favor? I'm going to have a roll call vote. Paul Lees?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes?
I'm a yes as well. New business, would any members like to raise items for inclusion on a future agenda?
Yes. I would like to bring up a potential item. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, teenagers who do not get enough sleep are more likely to be overweight, not engage in daily physical activity, suffer from symptoms of depression, engage in unhealthy risk behaviors, and perform more poorly in school than their peers who get enough sleep. One of the contributing factors cited by the CDC and the AAP to lack of sleep in teens is the start times for middle and high school students.
Paul, could you tell us what your topic is, and we'll put that topic, Paul?
I would like to receive a report from the superintendent on the barriers to starting school later at the middle school and high school, and what would be required to shift the middle school and high school start times no earlier than the 8:30 recommended by the AAP, so that we can have a discussion on that topic.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
So just to make sure I'm clear, because I'm hearing, yes, you want to do this. It's the barriers to do that.
The next item is the committee reorganization planning. At the meeting after next month's election, the school committee will need to reorganize its leadership. Since the district's policy states that only members with at least a full year of elected offices are eligible to take leadership roles, we have traditionally gone around the table at the April meeting and had members state which positions they are eligible or if they were willing to accept if they were nominated. This allows the committee to do some educated thinking between now and May about who they might like to see work for the board in the coming year. Some roles do have additional qualifications beyond the year in office, and the link to the policy that details those qualifications is in the agenda. So even if you decide that because of the time constraints, which being on the school committee is time constraints anyways, that it doesn't mean that you don't care and don't want to be in those positions. Some of us have more time than others, so I don't want anybody to feel that they have to take these positions. It's if you're willing to take these positions. So if we could start with Paul.
I'm good in the chair I'm in.
Can you write down who's?
Yes, sir.
Erin?
Linda, I would not qualify for chair, but I believe that the other positions I would be qualified for based on the criteria.
Are you willing, or are you saying you don't?
Linda told me to write stuff down, so I have to know what to write down.
I'm willing to hold a position if my peers are selecting me, but I'm definitely willing to yield to someone else as well.
Susanna?
Based on the qualifications, I don't meet at least two of them, and I would like to stay in my current position and not move to any. I think the only one is secretary that I would qualify for.
Okay. Almayet?
Assuming reelection, I would be happy to continue serving as secretary if that was the will of the committee. I'm not prepared to take on other positions.
Okay. Paul Goldman?
I believe I am qualified for secretary or vice chair, but not chairperson. I would prefer not to serve in those capacities next year, but would if the committee called on me to do so.
Thank you, Paul. Caitlin?
I would prefer, I go with what Erin said. I will yield if someone else would like to sit where I sit, but I will stay if that is what happens.
Matt Landers?
I think I'm only eligible for secretary, and I'll let Paul do it if he gets reelected, because I don't think I'd be a very good secretary with note-taking.
Thank you. Narissa?
I am eligible for them all. I am up for re-election this year, and in order to run for re-election, I had to promise my family that I would never be chair again. But I can serve as vice chair or secretary if the committee so wills it.
I am. I'm qualified for all three, and whatever the will of the committee is, I'll be willing to serve in any of the three seats. Okay, moving on.
Do we get to do it now?
No, it's after elections. So you have time to, a whole month to think about it. The next item is public use of school fields and grounds. I'm going to turn that agenda over to the superintendent.
Thank you. So this topic, I wrote a little blurb in my report. We are seeing an uptick in the number of individuals using specifically this campus during the school day when it's being used for school purposes. So when we built the stadium, we said, obviously, particularly the stadium or the tennis courts, we said, right, this is for public use. The idea was that the students and student athletes are the priority during the school day and during school events. So we don't have any signage, we don't have a policy that says school use, student use, is a priority. So we've had, I don't want to call them incidents, but it's been a number of times, it's happening fairly routinely when a gym class needs to use the track or the field and they're asking people to leave. The majority of the time, people are amenable to that. We've definitely had several instances where those individuals were not particularly pleased. So, you know, it's one thing if we're using the turf for a PE class and there's someone walking on the track, but it's another thing when we have I don't know if you were at the track meet this afternoon and there's swarming with hundreds of athletes and coaches. So I wanted to put this on the agenda to explore your appetite for, there's two approaches. Again, our facilities use policy, I believe I'm not going to try and guess, speaks very specifically to the use by outside individuals. There are some examples, I have Lynn Fields, that has that similar MASC policy, but then goes on to prioritize student use and then community use and then general public use. So I would be very interested, so I should say that's one avenue is changing it by policy. The other is putting signage up, which is what many districts have done, more so in recent years. And that allows the police to then enforce it, right? The police can enforce anything that we've posted, whether it be loitering or public use. So certainly didn't want to put up signs without having that discussion with you. Again, it's particularly this campus that we're seeing the need. I think people understand an elementary school is off bounds or off limits during the school day. But at this campus, obviously, it's a much wider campus. And again, in particular, it's the tennis courts or the track and stadium itself that we've seen a number of uptick in cases. Kyle's like, yeah, I keep hearing about this. So that's the question is the committee willing to entertain that as a notion? And then if that's the case, would you rather we go the signage route? And I would bring back to you what the signage we'd be putting up, or is it something you'd like to codify in policy?
I would like to see that signs are put up. They should be at, talk with my hand. I would think that they should be at all 5 schools.
Yes, we would do them at all schools. It would be a district-wide thing that we would implement. But the issue that's been raised is it's happening at the high school and middle school campus.
I think just for safety reasons, those signs should be put up, that nobody should be on school grounds while school is. Are you saying that they're using it after school gets out because we have functions that go on out there for sports?
Both. I mean, the most problematic has been during the school day. And again, there haven't been any major scenes, but it's someone who might be using the tennis courts, and then the tennis courts are needed for a PE class, or, like I said, the track, and there's someone running, or a lot of issues with walking dogs, which that's an easier one to just escort people on their way. But yeah, so at a minimum, I'm proposing signage. If you felt comfortable and wanted to move forward with a policy as well, we could do that as well. It does not have to be in policy. That seems to be not the norm. There are some examples, most districts, and speaking, it's pretty normal around us now, where there's signage throughout the campus, the school campuses, that just said, you know, during the school day and during school-based events.
So is the intent to completely eliminate the public being on the track during the day, or is it only to say, like, if the gym class comes out, you need to leave? Like, Because that is a difference.
Yeah, so the conflict, if I wasn't as concerned about safety and security, I would say when there's a conflict, as a general rule, I think it's prudent at this point to make sure we say visitors are not welcome on this campus during the day when we're protecting the lives of 1,000 students and 250 staff. So I would say, it would say that the campuses are closed for public access during the school day.
And what define the school day? Does that also include after school track and field? Like if you're on the track and field team, does that include that as part of the day?
It would, so it would say during the school day and during school-based events and activities. So we wouldn't be able to put a time on that, right? We'd be able to say from 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and then during after-school and evening activity. Which again, when there's an event out there, it's not as much of an issue, and we haven't run into an issue, especially when there's it could be a football game going on and someone could be walking around the path. Could be on the track, and it wouldn't be a problem. But it's really the field and track. But the intent would be to close it down entirely for public access.
Does anybody else have any questions? Is everybody in favor of them putting up signs? Anybody disagree?
Okay.
Signs?
We will bring you, I think we have drafts. We will bring you back in May, mock-ups of what those signs would look like. Make sure you're okay with that, and then implement that shortly thereafter. Great, thank you.
The next item is the updated enrollment forecast. As we discussed last year, the forecasted enrollment for a district is very important when applying for a potential capital project with the state. The district has contracted McKiddon Demographic Research to take a second look at the enrollment forecast so that the district isn't relying just on NESDEC. The superintendent will take us through the McKiddon report.
So you tell me how much time you want to go through this. I just want to orient you to the report. So this is very different. In the past, we're members of NESDEC, New England School Development Council. As part of that, we get updated enrollment forecasts, fairly simplistic in their approach. As you can see in the McKibbin report, he lays out the approach, the methodology, the assumptions he's made throughout. And so I think it gives a much more accurate picture of what we can assume moving forward. So I am, again, delineates there the difference between a projection and a forecast. These are forecasts based on factors that there are additional assumptions made. It's not just what the data shows currently at this moment in time. So I don't want to go through all the assumptions and everything, but some of the key pieces as we go through this on page 9, he talks about the high proportion of high school graduates from the Triton Regional School District that attend college or move to urban areas outside of the district for employment is a significant demographic factor. So there are multiple factors throughout, whether it be the number of individuals who graduate and move away from the district, or I'm going to forget the word, it's a replenishment. It's the birth rate, fertility rate. Is it ITF on page? Yeah, page 6. I don't want to go into total fertility rate, but the 2.1 on average assumes you're replenishing your population. It's estimated to be 1.78. So there's multiple things throughout this report, whether it be that total fertility rate that's below what would be replenishment rate, or the number of individuals that they're assuming would continue to, after graduation, go to college and not return to the area, talking about basically the reasoning of why we've seen a declining population, specifically with school-age children in the past years, and what we can project for the future. So there's also some interesting, what we don't get with NESDEC is some of the town-by-town data in specific demographic information that isn't even necessarily school-based, but it talks about the households with population under 18 versus the total households on page 12. percentage of households that have a single-person households, where you usually see a lot of disparate data between the three communities when we talk about the commonalities in the district and across the three communities. This report starts to tease out some of the things that show why certain towns are seeing a decrease in population, while others, obviously we're talking this year, Newbury went down 10, while Rowley went up 34. And those trends are largely projected to continue. So again, in those assumptions that he made at the beginning of the report, or that he made in doing this study and outlined at the beginning of the report, it's reinforcing the assumptions that we've made in recent years, and it seems to give a little more accurate breakdown and detailing of the reasoning for those changes. So again, the meat, right, when we get all the way to the back is where it gets interesting to start talking about the actual projected enrollments for the schools. So over the next 10 years, and again, this is looking next school year and the following 9 years. So it's the next 10 years, the 23-24 school year through the 2032 to 33, if that doesn't make you feel old. School years, so it shows total pre-K enrollment over the district going from next year assumed at 1291 up to 1343, so an increase of roughly 50 students. Not, I think we would call that over a decade. It's ebbing and flowing, roughly stagnant over a 10-year period. Middle school going from a projection next year of 306 to 344 out 10 years later. High school next year is currently at 649. We're going to see a dip next year to 611 and back up to 634 10 years out. So by and large, total pre-K through 12, we're 2243 this year, looks to be 2217 for next school year, and then 2330 10 years out. So gaining roughly 100 students. If you break out then, this does not break out the student enrollment by town, it breaks it out by school. But if you look at specifically the three elementary schools, you can see that the projections are, not shocking, that Rowley continues to see the growth where the other two towns do not see the growth. So if you look on page 21, put the glasses back on, Pine Grove currently at, Newbury Elementary currently at 412, projected 434 next year, up to 443 10 years out. So a gain of 9 students over a decade, again, ebbing and flowing there. Pine Grove School, currently 432, looking like 442 next year, on up to 500, hits actually 505 in the 27-28 year. In 10 years out is at 500, so an increase of roughly 70 students over the current. And Salisbury Elementary, currently at 421, 415 next year, and then dipping into the 300s for the majority of the decade, and then coming back to 400. Again, these are forecasts. A lot will change, but I think looking at those three schools specifically shows where overall it's showing a slight decrease in Salisbury, static in Newbury, and a continued increase in Rowley. We certainly will present this to the towns at the next DCC and have this discussion. It's one data point, but it reinforces what we've been seeing and what we kind of in general terms are seeing in the NESDEC. We actually just got the updated NESDEC today, and there's some questions for that, but what we've been seeing as a trend in the NESDEC reporting, but this gives a whole lot more detail, and I think helpful detail for the next decade. So again, we'll present that to the towns. Nothing that we would do or change at this point for us. We needed to do this. It's not true. We need enrollment projections when we get accepted into the MSBA, whether that's this current year or next year when we try again. So we're always going to have a secondary and backup, and then the first one of the first tasks when we get invited into eligibility is hammering down what our enrollments look like. We're having a discussion with the town of Rowley because the MSBA will always hammer down on the projected enrollments, and we want to make sure that it's realistic. And we're now in a situation where at Pine Grove School, we're already going to be contending for space based on there's a lot of factors in there, and there were a lot of decisions that were wise as far as reimbursement, but that will need to be addressed. So this is going to be important information. If we get accepted into the MSBA program, we would have Jerry refresh this data next year, so we get updated forecasts, and that would be the tool that we'd be able to take to the MSBA to fight for what we believe is an accurate enrollment for this campus.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian?
I have one, and it just concerns one of the assumptions they make. And this is going to be tricky because it's not going to be before MSBA, but it says there's an assumption of the number of students leaving for private school staying static. With a new building, my guess is that that might not be the case, but I don't know how much data we have on why students are leaving. So I don't know if that's something we can, I don't know if that's something you agree with, or?
It would be a data point we would use in our discussions with the MSBA. I don't think there would be any demographer that would come in and say, well, if you build it, they'll come. We know, right, that's a reality. But that would certainly be, it would be an argument we could use, and I believe that's an argument that happens, right, typically. And it may sway that we're able to change the enrollment a little bit. But the percentage of each class that has moved from our elementary schools into private schools in the middle and high school has stayed relatively static over time. So that's the same percentage that he's using, average.
Go ahead, Paul.
Brian, do we have any mechanism of learning from the towns through the DCC about projected building that's coming down the pike, subdivisions and things like that?
An official mechanism, no, but that's a really interesting discussion so that we can, right? So I will say this, so when Jerry does his research, he spoke with each of the town clerks. So when we're doing, so I guess there is a mechanism because we don't get that reported to us through the DCC, but when these demographic studies are done, they do meet with the town. So one of the assumptions, it was all known and permitted. I believe that was it was permitted and approved building projects get fully built out. So Falcon Ridge entirely built out. Anything else that's approved right now in the town of Rowley, they assume gets fully built out, and they make an assumption on average children per household. But no, it's an interesting conversation to have with the DCC, especially if there's things that wouldn't be documented and approved or in the pipeline, but the select board or planning board might know of something coming. If they can give us a heads up, that allows us to work with McKibben to make sure that an updated forecast could reflect some of that.
Yeah, I think it'd just be a good topic to raise to the DCC, the reps that show up. I was driving down Dodge Road to come here tonight, and there's a pretty big parcel in Raleigh that's been for sale for years and years. And lo and behold, there's a huge cut-in off of Dodge Road to that area. So I have no idea what the real fallout of that is, but I would be concerned.
We'll bring that up to the DCC. Any other questions? The next item is the evaluation of the superintendent. The committee is responsible for reviewing the superintendent's performance annually. This year, we have also asked the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee to review the evaluation process. I am going to ask Paul Golden to begin this discussion with a recap of the subcommittee's review, and then the superintendent can discuss the proposed timeline for the evaluation. Paul?
So we evaluate the superintendent both on his goals and some standards. And last year, the tools that we had gave us different ratings for his goals and the standards that we evaluate on. And so it came to the Policy and Advocacy Committee subcommittee to look at that and make some recommendations. Essentially, our recommendation is that we have what we believe is a good tool. A lot of work was put into developing the tool to capture the information. And last year, we had unforeseen circumstances that interrupted the goals of the superintendent, and so the superintendent was focusing on other areas. Those sorts of judgments are judgments that are should be made by the committee as to whether the superintendent has done the right thing to leave his goals by the wayside and focus on other matters that arise. So essentially our recommendation is to leave the tool in process, but simply to have it be put forth a recommended rating for the committee to discuss.
going to talk about your schedule?
I can, yeah. I didn't know if you all wanted to. I didn't know if you were looking at me to comment on that. Okay, that sounds good. So as far as timeline, I will actually not be at the May meeting. I'm going to be away, celebrating 50 years on this earth and 25 years of marriage, and making sure I have another 25 married. But at the May meeting, I will provide a narrative for all of you for my goals and progress on that, as well as work on the standards. And then from that, right, you take that, you'll go through that information in May, and then you all set the timeline to set you have the, not a Google form, it's Google form, the Google form to submit the standards, and then you put that all together, and then at the June meeting, you vote the overall. So the change here is you're not going to come forward with an average, you're going to come forward with the data, and then the committee will make a judgment, which I think makes sense. So.
And just to circle back on the recommendation from the Policy and Advocacy Committee, that there was a lot of work done on the evaluation where a lot of the standards didn't make sense of how we evaluated, so they had condensed them down to what we thought best evaluated Brian. So I agree with the recommendations. The next item is the superintendent's report. Brian will provide his monthly report.
Okay, before I get to the written report, there was a couple of things that came up time sensitive that I just want to mention. The first being, we've been waiting to hear back. I had reported, and we had the discussions with the DCC about the ownership of Salisbury Elementary School. So the first thing we learned was we hired a title attorney to do research, and there is no record at the Registry of Deeds of the transference of any ownership of either a parcel or a property from the town of Salisbury to the Triton Regional School District. So that was the first piece, right? We're pretty sure, if we know that it hasn't been registered, that there was no sale. So then the second kind of the belt and suspenders approach, we, working with our financial advisors, got back with the original bond counsel that issued the bonds in late 90s, right? Original, 99, 2000? Was it? Oh, yeah, by the time the bonds were issued, yes. And I believe the word they used was, well, we just make assumptions, right? We just assume that if they say they own it, they own it. Super helpful. So we know that Mass statute allows a regional school district to incur debt for a building that it operates, even if it doesn't own it. So none of the powers that be are still around. There's no documentation that confirms this, but clearly there was discussions. The regional agreement was amended to talk about the district will own, so that we could then convince the bond council that we owned the district. I'm sorry, that we owned, I hope we own the district, that we own Salisbury Elementary so we could incur the debt on it. And so it seems like from everything we can find legally, that's the way this worked. So we don't own the Salisbury Elementary School. So it's going to be as simple as there is no process. We do need to update the regional agreement eventually so that it matches reality, but there's nothing that the regional agreement can do that supersedes the reality that we do not own Salisbury Elementary School. So at the next DCC, we'll bring this information to them. I have a report from Cindy Needle, title law. It's real and exciting. So we'll bring that information as well as the follow-up information from bond counsel and share that with the towns, and then assuming that there's nothing else, no pomp and circumstance, we'll begin that process to make sure that the major shifts are, because we have said we own Salisbury Elementary School, we insure this facility and Salisbury's facility. We then insure the contents of the entire district. So now we'll just ensure the structure of this 286,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet of, at Salisbury Elementary School will become the property of the town of Salisbury. It's thousands of dollars, it's not huge money that it would save. And then even on down to the financial statements, when it talks about assets and liabilities, there will be implications and kind of ripples, but nothing that we anticipate is anything really material. So wanted to share that with you. That was kind of hot off the press, so I didn't want to wait. And that way, I think we're meeting late this month, right, with the DCC. So we'll share that with them, and I didn't want to share that with them before sharing it with you. I also wanted to celebrate Science Day at Pine Grove. If you're on social media, you might have seen pictures of, I don't know if Narissa and Linda were in the pictures, but it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. It was a ton of work by folks planning it. Narissa needs to take a lot of credit. A lot of folks who put a lot of work in, but Narissa was instrumental there. So it was amazing to see students enjoying science and mathematics in real life, practically. So awesome day. I hope it not only becomes a tradition at Pine Grove, but it becomes a tradition everywhere. Probably not a good time to say that out loud right now.
I just would like to say that I was a presenter and had 5 classes, and we had to control the kids because they were so excited to tell us about their past sessions that they had, that we had to try and get them going on the session that we had for them. So they really enjoyed having that. It was great. I enjoyed it.
It was amazing. It was amazing. I mean, fossils and engineering and environmental engineering and animals and you name it. It was awesome. So,
And heart and lungs.
exactly. And snakes. Please, yes, add anything you'd like.
I was just going to say, if we're going to give credit here, Nicola Perrier's vision for this, I couldn't believe it when she first said it, that she wanted to have all the students traveling independently based on their passions. And I think that's what made it so successful, was that the kids literally picked what they wanted to do and take these deep dives with truly, in some case, experts on the topics. The fossil gentleman Tom Rich, who I spent time with this morning, he is retired, but he is hired by private collectors to recreate dinosaur skeletons, and that's what he does. And he had his private collection there, and yeah, it was impressive. But I just also, on top of that, I mean, it was phenomenal effort by everybody, but the community came out. Like, there was no one that said no when we asked them, calling out to area businesses, calling out to area organizations that had this expertise within their group, that they just all came forward and they were so willing to share. And it was amazing that they wanted to come in. And so many of them just said, like, call me when next year's date comes up. And it was so nice. And we got so many compliments on the students and the staff and the facilities and just the culture that exists there. It was an all around just like great experience. So.
And then the other piece is the FY24 House budget drop. Say that, another cool 21 phrase. The budget dropped today, and so there are certainly some good signs. Are you making fun of me?
You can't really say that because we think the budget like dropped. Like,
No, that's like you drop a new tune or I don't know. I'm speaking below my age. So kind of 3 key things I wanted to mention. An additional $30 per pupil for Chapter 70 was included, separate line item. 100% regional transportation was included, first time in history. And universal meals is included using fair share amendment as a permanent thing, not a one-time gap in a fiscal 24 budget, but an outside line that changes the law to put some of that money towards universal free meals. So, school meals, I should say. So, lots more to come on that, lots more information. But just wanted to note that still lots of things battles to be fought. But I just wanted to mention those things so they were on your radar.
I just want to say I'm speechless.
100% transportation, right? Go figure. And again, there's still lots of people who don't like that, and so there will be lots of people trying to poke holes at that, particularly in the Senate and then in joint. But it's sure as heck has a much better chance when it starts out at 100,000. So, huge win.
And I think that's why it's so important every year that we bring our representation here.
Absolutely.
To keep driving that point home.
Absolutely.
Takes a village.
It does. Wise woman once said. Just to note here, again, going on the written report, the statement of interest has been submitted. I'm actually working with Senator Tarr, Representative Shand, and Kastner on that joint letter of support. actually working with the Senator's Chief of Staff, A.J. Paglia, on getting that drafted. So they like to get that in within a week or two of the deadline. The deadline for submitting SOIs is this Friday. We obviously got ours back in on March 21st, but just to confirm that we do have that submitted. COVID tracing and reporting, obviously, it's not just Triton everywhere. We've actually held out on the reporting a lot longer than a lot of other districts have, a lot of other areas. We have committed to continue the tracing with Bonnie Barrington, who is technically through the Newbury Board of Health, but we pay the contract to continue that additional tracing, working with our nurses. We're going to continue that through the rest of this year. Probably not necessary, but I think at this point we have it. It's pretty minimal, but we're going to continue it through this year. Beyond this year, that is ESSER funded, so that money is gone. And so, I mean, we haven't been reporting to the Department of Ed all year, and so when we get to the end of this year, we'll ramp down the reporting on the website and that additional tracing that we're doing. By and large, most families are doing at-home tests, and I'm sure there's more COVID than they're reporting to us. So I think any reporting we're doing is fairly not accurate, and I'd rather not have inaccurate, misleading data on our website that pretends that we're getting capturing all the information. So just wanted to report that to you. I don't think that's anomalous to what any other district is doing, but just want to note that. Questions? I'll keep going. Just to, again, to note, there's a new statewide IEP that's been developed. It's actually been years in the making. Just wanted to bring your attention, to your attention. We are going to use the next year. Feel free to jump in, Shannon, if I miss anything here. We're going to be using the next year to train up everyone on the new process. It's much more student-centered. It's actually great. I mean, I was saying it's a great process. It's a great change. So we're going to use the next year. A lot of districts are doing the same thing, and then we have to implement that by September of '24. So we are going to use the next year to make sure we're all on board on the same page, and because it changes the IEP itself, it changes the development of the process for it. So again, a very positive change that is coming down the pike. We talked about the use of public fields. Won't say anything more on that. We'll bring you signs in May. Mock-ups of signs, not real signs. Campus security, we talked about this campus in general. Just to note, again, with every no from the MSBA, we know we're delaying the inevitable a year. So we are going ahead and as we continue to work through the security of our campuses, obviously we know, unfortunately, we know all too well that locked doors save lives. And so we've taken precautions at all of the elementary schools. Now have the ability to lock their doors in the classrooms with a push of a button or the throw of a switch, and it's like a hotel when from the inside, if you open the door, it undoes the deadbolt at the same time. This campus would be significant dollars to retrofit all the classrooms. So we have all the doors remain locked, and there's a magnetic strip over the strike. So you'll notice if you go into a room here, you just push and the door opens. If you want to lock the door, you just simply remove the magnet, shut the door, and the strike plate re-engages. So the other piece is the perimeter. And what I noted here is this high school campus is horrible to try and lock down. There are so many groups, so many individuals, whether it be athletic teams meeting here early to get over to the rink for practice or you name it, early in the morning, late at night, all hours of the day, this campus is hopping. So over the years, we've seen enough of a inconsistency with keys that we decided it's worth it to spend the money. Again, it's not huge dollars, but just we're rekeying all 19 doors. Again, this campus is numbered. Middle school is 1, and then you number back around to the end of the middle school is door 19. So all 19 exterior doors will be keyed with a different master key so that we can ensure that no one has a straggler of a exterior key to get into the building. Again, in the classrooms, it's different. So just wanted to note that. Department of Public Health, we've had this before. We actually, a year and a half ago, there was a concern raised through the Department of Public Health, through the town health department in Newbury about, everyone talks about the sludge, right, on the middle school wall. We clean it, the temperatures fluctuate and it starts rolling back down. Again, it's not mold. We've had interior mold testing done. There's hundreds of times more mold outside in the air than there are inside the building, even in those spaces. That's actually glue from the roof coming down. Anyway, there was another complaint levied with the town of Newbury. They reached out, and apparently it made it to the state. So working with Mass DPH, they said the easiest way is for us to come out and do our own assessment, and then we can, we've provided the various reports that we've done in recent years, and provide that. They appreciate that. They actually don't do mold testing. They do air quality, so they come out and stand in a room for 4 minutes. They have meters that read the air in every single room. So apparently he thought the school was much smaller, so they came out with a team of 2 and like, ooh, we'll button it up in a day. They're coming out 2 more times so they can get every ounce of this campus because they want it when it's occupied in regular operation. So a couple more visits to button that up. Again, we don't expect anything that, and we're great, right? So we don't expect that we're going to learn anything other than what we know, right, of what we've already identified in the statement of interest in that facilities assessment. So there are definitely things that we can and should improve, but they're large, entire system improvements that would be part of any kind of renovation we'd be looking. So just want to make you aware of that. Can't imagine the Newbury Board of Health is reaching out to you, but in case you hear about that or see DPH people walking around the building, there you have it. Any questions on that? Okay. Universal free school meals, again, I just mentioned, it is in the latest House budget, permanent. That doesn't mean it's done, right? There are still people who do not believe that it should be universal and free for all. So we've mentioned this before. Sarah Littman has done yeoman's work on this, made it all the way down to DC and met with Senator Ed Markey and lots of work. She's been working with Senator Sal DiDomenico and Project Bread. They chose Triton, likely, right? I think it's fair to say because of Sarah and the work that she's been doing with them. So on May 15th, that's a Monday, it's the Monday before our next school committee meeting, Project Bread US, so it'll be the national USDA, as well as DESE reps. I've invited, I think you CC'd you on a message to our 3 representatives and senator. Hopefully, I have on good word that Senator Tar will be there with the hairnet on, and I'm sworn to make sure there's a picture of that. So I believe all 3 of them will be there. We'll all be there with hats and aprons and celebrating school meals, the importance of school meals. So certainly if you are interested in being part of that, it'll be 10 to about 11:30-ish, call it 10 to noon time. The rest of the group is then heading back into Boston. I don't anticipate that I'll be following them back into Boston, but certainly would welcome you to be part of that. If you're interested, certainly let me know, and we'll make sure we have hairnets and aprons for all of them. What do I want to say on that? Something else about meals I was going to mention. And then the final thing here, the Stadium Garden Project. We had talked about that in the past. TEF has done the fundraising for that. Originally with the building, the stadium project, they've kept that money set aside. They're continuing to make money on it thanks to interest rates. We delayed that project. We were going to do it this spring. We had talked about the benches, and I know that was not the will of the committee to do the engraved benches. They are going to move forward with the brick project, but the cost of doing it escalated substantially. And so in talking through that with the TEF board, we felt like, you know what, we believe we have a pretty good sense that there's nothing under that garden if and when this renovation project happens. But before we sink that kind of money in, before TEF does, let's make sure that know exactly how it would be disrupted in any kind of project. So we know the building and the stadium itself does not contain any utilities, but just to make sure. So we're going to hold off on that. It's likely a couple of years. They still do want to do it. They still do want to revive that brick program. But in the meantime, we're just going to hold off and wait for a better time. So happy to answer any questions you have.
Does anybody have any questions for Brian? Can I have a motion to receive? Oh, sure,
I
I'm
don't
sorry.
necessarily have a question, but I just wanted to say, looking at the personnel report, there are a lot of names on here that I'm sad to see, but Chris Walsh and Cara Briley are two names I was very sad to see on here.
Yes.
Phenomenal people who have contributed so much to the district.
Worth mentioning, yes. So Chris Walsh is a staple in the amount of institutional knowledge that that man has about all 600,000 square feet. So we have plans in the works. It's advertised. We are going to have a transition, right? There is a lot of information to transition. And then for Kara Briley, certainly we know it's been challenging. We've been trying to make sure we shift that position. It's still our priority to shift that position into the general budget. It's not. It's still grant funded. And ultimately, she is a licensed clinician, and this world needs more licensed clinicians. So we are very sad to see her go, but it's also great to have another clinician in the area where can we refer people to. So yes, so we also, that is in the process. That's been advertised and in process of replacing her as well. We'll have that transition, but yes, not good news.
Can I have a motion to receive and file the April 2023 Superintendent's Report as presented?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We're going to have a roll call vote. Paulise?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Golder?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. The next item is the FY22 audit presentation. The district is audited annually, and Director of Finance and Operations, Kyle Warren, is going to take us through the highlights of the audit that was recently completed.
Terrific. All right, I'll keep this brief. Right? 5 minutes. So the 3 reports attached to the agenda are the results of the audit. We went through the process as well as the 3 reports in a pretty detailed level with Finance Subcommittee at the most recent meeting, but certainly share with you all the top points. So in terms of process with the audit, they come in each year, and outside of the reports, behind that is a series of testing that they do with us. They test transactions, payroll, invoices, manual journal entries, things of that nature. They take a look at our internal controls, how we process bills, how we check balances to make sure everything's shipshape. And at the end of all of that, we had what is called an unmodified opinion, which is the best you can get. It means that we have a sound system of internal controls. All of the balances that you see in these financial statements are accurate, materially accurate. So that's certainly a testament to not only the financial staff that we have at central office, but each of the school buildings are involved in that with submitting POs, submitting invoices, where everybody involved really adheres to the processes that we have in place, as well as continue looking at those processes to say, hey, are these working? Should we improve? Should we evaluate? So we have a phenomenal team here at Triton. In terms of the financial statements, I'll start with those. The largest report there. So by structure of this report, it has different components. Right at the start is the auditor's opinion. That's technically the only part of the report that they own. The rest of it is they just put together, is technically ours. They put it together as a service, and then we make sure that it agrees with our records and all that. So there's a 2-page opinion there. Again, an unmodified, best you can get. The next section is the management discussion and analysis. That's a cliff notes, if you will, of the financials as a whole. Gives a summary of the different balances, what went on during the year. And then the next sections are 2 different series or 2 different types of financial statements. You have full accrual financial statements, which mirror what you would see in a corporation. They're a long-term perspective, so you have long-term assets, fixed assets. You have long-term liabilities like pension and OPEB and debt layered onto there. And it's important to highlight that that is a long-term perspective, because when you see not only the statement of net position, but also there's a revenue and expense or a statement of activities as well. There's a series of revenues and expenses that are reported on a full accrual basis of accounting that don't necessarily mirror how we maintain our district accounting ledgers or how we budget our resources. They're just financial statement accruals. So that's important to highlight. The next layer of financial statements is called the fund-based, or the GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. Financial statements, and those more closely mirror how we maintain our ledgers here at the district. After those is a set of footnotes, which expand on various financial elements, super interesting to read, right? And then at the end is what's called the required supplementary information, which gives a multi-year trend reporting of the net pension liability, the net OPEB liability, as well as a schedule that's our budget to actual that's reviewed on a monthly basis with Finance Subcommittee. That said, I wanted to first go to the full accrual financial statements to mention it does reflect an $89 million deficit in net position. That might seem alarming. We're in the same position as nearly every municipality, school district, city, town in Massachusetts. The reason for that large deficit is entirely due to pension and OPEB obligations. OPEB for the year was about 81 million of a liability, and the net pension liability, which is Essex Regional Retirement System, was 11 million. So once you pull that out of there, you can see we're really maintaining a positive balances. And then on the fund-based financial statements, which are on page 13 and 15 of the report, again, these mirror our actual ledgers. Important to highlight that we have about $4 million of fund balances here on the district ledgers, which was an improvement of approximately $860,000 over the prior year. That was due to about $500,000 of improving general fund balances. That was reflected when we discussed our $1.1 million certified E&D balance, which was certainly favorable. And then also our circuit breaker fund, so special ed out of district tuitions and the reimbursement from the state, we were able to maintain 1 year's worth of reserves. We still have a way to go in terms of maintaining financial strength and flexibility. That 1.1 million of E&D certified balance, the rating agencies look at that as a percentage of our total general fund operating budget. So 1.1 million as a percentage of the $46 million operating budget is 2.4%. The rating agencies recommend between 10 and 15% for AAA rated communities and school districts. So we're heading in the right direction, certainly, but we do have some ways to go there. I'll leave that alone. Lastly, pension and OPEB. I did mention there how we have a $81 million OPEB liability on pages 29 through 37 of the footnotes. Is a series of schedules that detail the underlying assumptions of that OPEB liability. It did actually decrease about $15 million over the prior year, which just really shows the volatility of that liability. It's the way it's calculated or estimated is by an outside actuary that we hire. Underlying assumptions. One of the most significant drivers of that liability is what's called the discount rate or an interest rate assumption. In the prior year, we had a 2.16% interest rate assumption, or a discount rate. That was bumped to 3.54% because of the economic climate that we're in, increasing interest rates. So that yielded entirely the $14, $15 million drop in the liability. Because as interest rates go up, the liability goes down. So kind of interesting there. I'll stop on the financial statements. Again, we went in detail with the Finance Subcommittee, but any questions on that report? Next, real quick, is the schedule of expenditures of federal awards, commonly referred to as the CFA. It reports our expenditures of federal awards. So for FY22, as of June 30th, 2022, we had $3.9 million of federal award expenditures. The auditors come in, they take a look to make sure we're reporting all of those expenditures accurately. Then they also select a series of grants to test for compliance against the federal compliance requirements for each of those individual programs. For this year, this round of audits, they selected the COVID relief funding, makes sense, and they didn't see any issues, no findings, no question costs, so certainly the best results we could ask for there. That's a quick and easy report. Last is, any questions on that one? No. Last is the management letter. A management letter is only required to be given if there are any what's called material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, either in our internal control or process structure, or if any of the underlying balances in our financial statements are inaccurate. There were none of those. They can also write comments if they have concerns about our operations that don't necessarily rise to that level. They did not have any of those either, but they do typically provide us with, in a management letter format, informational items. So this year there were 6 different items there. 2 of them, or the first was discussing the economic climate, just making sure we're aware of the inflation that everyone is experiencing, and to make sure that that's flowing through to our budget process and we're not getting ourselves into a pickle, basically. But certainly we've been talking about that extensively. Second comment is a pretty interesting one. It goes into a high level of detail about our bond rating, or not necessarily our bond rating, but just how ratings are developed as a whole and the individual elements there. They do note or comment on our financial reserve policy and how we're specifically addressing each one of those elements, but interesting context there. Discusses our long-term obligations, pensions, and OPEB, again, that we have a funding plan in place, but just because it is such a talked about topic in the municipal communities, they wanted to discuss that. And then investment income opportunities, again, the economic climate, just making sure we're aware that as interest rates are rising, we do have opportunities for additional investment income to fund our budget. We do have a budgeted line item. We did increase that this year as part of the budget process, so certainly attuned to that. Any questions? Again, keeping that at a high level.
So thank you for this, Kyle. I always appreciate the thoroughness of your review of audits and enthusiasm too. In the bond rating section of the management letter, I just noticed that it doesn't seem to acknowledge that we have established a stabilization fund. And I don't know if that's a different type of stabilization fund than what we established, or...
So this was the fiscal 22 report.
Oh, that's right, okay.
They make reference to our financial reserve policy, but I'll make sure, that's a great point, that they are aware that we established that, just because we continue discussions with them throughout the year, but I'll make sure that that's highlighted.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure we're getting credit for it.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, can I have a motion to receive and file the FY22 audited financial statements, draft single audit and management letter?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We have to have a roll call vote. Paul Lees?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes?
I'm a yes as well. The next item is the CREST and NEC representation. The district has representation on the boards of the collaborative that we participate in. For the recent past, the superintendent has been the representative. And unless there are any objections, I would like to request a motion that he continue to serve in that capacity. So I will make a motion to approve the continued representation during the 2023-2024 school year by the superintendent of schools on the board of directors to both collaboratives that a district is a member of, including CREST Collaborative and North Shore Educational Consortium.
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Paulise?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Erin? Sorry, Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. The next is a policy update file, JH on student attendance. I will turn the next two items, policy JH on student attendance and the language on excused and unexcused absences, over to Paul Goldner to discuss the policy and advocacy subcommittee's work and recommendations.
Okay, so first you have in front of you a recommendation to adopt changes to policy JH, which is student absences and excuses. We're asking that this be voted as a final approval so we can put it into place. However, the change to the policy is one, that the student handbook languages will contain the details about what is excused or unexcused. And then, because there are some small differences between the schools that make sense there. But also, the other change is that we are adding language. The current policy says each principal or designee will notify a student's parent or guardian within 3 days of the student's absence in the event the parent or guardian has not informed the school of the absence. 3 days is entirely too long to not be notified that your child has not arrived at school. So we are recommending changing that language to as soon as possible and generally within 2 hours of beginning of the day, but no later than 3 days of the student's absence. And the reason for the 3 days is that is the governing statute, if I recall correctly. Yep. So that's what we're recommending. Anything else to add, Brian?
On the
That
policy
piece?
specifically? Yeah, no, I think you.
Can we get a motion to approve the changes as recommended and if agreed to by the committee as a final approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the changes as recommended as a final approval.
Second the motion.
Any discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. Paulise?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes?
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well.
So then we have the proposed elementary and middle school updated handbook language, as well as proposed high school updated handbook language. And as you can see that there's no proposed changes there for the elementary and middle school. The changes are coming in the handbooks at the high school under attendance. A key factor in achieving academic excellence is consistent attendance and punctuality. The responsibility for being in school rests upon the students and their parents or guardians. College admissions officers, scholarship committees, and future employers often evaluate attendance records. We are preparing students for careers, college, and community. Frequent absences from and tardiness to the classroom disrupts the continuity of instruction. The interaction of pupils with one another and with their teachers in the classroom is vital to achieving the goal of preparing students for their futures. To achieve this goal, we expect Triton students to attend school prepared and ready to learn. So there's a bit in there about the regulations. And so what we are adding here is students will face a failure for the quarter or an FA administrative failure if they would have earned a passing grade, yet their total unexcused absences exceed 5 in a full-time course or 2 in a part-time course per quarter. An FA can be issued on the 6th absence in a full-time course and on the 3rd absence in a part-time course. So there's also listings under the excused absences for college visits, job interviews, shadowing or professional appointments, armed services test. College visits, job interviews, job shadowing, armed service tests, and professional appointments are limited to 4 per year. Additional college visits are at the discretion of the principal with prior approval. And then there's medical absences. A doctor's note specific to the illness and dates of absence must be received in the main office within 3 days after the student. So I don't know. These are the handbooks. There are some governing regulations about attendance. We're adhering to that. I'm not sure if, Brian, if you have anything else that you want to cover in terms of that, or?
So the only thing I would say is, you talked about edits.
Yep.
So this is reflective. The first one is there are edits from what exists in the handbook. And the second one, the green is just highlighting the difference between what we're proposing as the high school and the elementary and middle above. So this reflects exactly what we're doing now, and it's what is required by law and statute. What exists in the handbooks is inconsistent and not accurate. So what this does is just to bring the language in the handbook up to what we're actually using now for unexcused. And some inconsistencies across the board. So this brings consistency, and so we're viewing this with the principals. This is what everyone believes. That is only right, but that it becomes enforceable.
Can I just ask, I want to make sure I heard you correctly, that the absence policy is required by statute? Is that what you just said?
It hits the issues that are required by statute.
Okay.
An excused and unexcused absence shouldn't be according to our attorney, the edit that we made to the policy says that the excused and unexcused definitions will exist in the student handbook.
Okay.
That makes it more, I have always been a fan, and obviously now you approve the student handbooks because that gives them the force of policy, but that's easier to change than policy itself. So this aligns with regulation and statute in what we're currently doing.
My only concern here, and it does go back to policies and philosophies, on what a grade is meant to reflect. My personal philosophy as far as that goes is that it should reflect what a student knows and is able to do. When you bring absences into it, it no longer is accurately recording that fact. And it's obviously a challenge back and forth. How do you then promote absences in a way that has a meaningful consequence? But I feel it does set us up to have grades that do not reflect accurately what students are learning.
I think we talked about this briefly. I would not disagree with you. The FA language has existed, and so that's, I think, a big larger change. So what I would suggest is if this becomes the language, we then can say, topic for future discussion, let's talk about FAs as a general rules, and academic failures is what should be AFs, but I guess they're FAs. Yeah. So I would say this doesn't change what is in practice and has been, from what I can tell, for a very, very long time. So I would like to have the high school be part of that, and I think this would be where it gets addressed, but this is just cleaning up. Take that as a completely separate topic and bring that back, and we can have the high school come back and present the reasoning for or against.
Is there any other questions? I have a question on excused absences. If you have a sporting event that, say, goes to the national whatever, would that be considered a excused absence if it's during, like if they have to go to, like DECA, if they go to the national whatever and have to miss a day of school, or if they go overnight, or?
Yeah, so so DECA would technically fall under like a field trip, or the kids came back from 8th grade from DC. That would be approved, that would be a field trip, and it could be at the discretion of the principal. National competitions always get funky because they're not sanctioned technically, but it could be, yes, it could be an excuse. The principal has the discretion and largely would provide those as excused absences if it was meaningful and substantive and it was not something that the child found their way into a national competition every other week.
That was all I... Any other questions?
One more thing I don't think we said. We're not going to reissue the handbooks this year in April, right, in May. So this would become language that we'll make sure gets put into the edits for next year.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve the proposed updated handbook language on excused and unexcused absences to include in updates to the student handbook for 2023-2024?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote. Paulise?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes?
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. So the next item is the policy update file JFAA residency requirement. This was put forward by the superintendent as a concern during the implementation of the Aspen registration system, and he's going to talk us through the proposed change and recommendation.
So yes, as you just mentioned, this came up as we've moved to online registration through Aspen. Particularly, we're rolling out, literally as we speak, online registration for our incoming kindergarten and preschool students. As we went through the process and in the templates that they had in their system, we realized that we don't have a residency policy, a requirement policy. So in working with our attorney, we're not required. What the statutes and our policies say is that the district will have a process to prove residency. So it's ebbed and flowed over the years. It's one of those things that hadn't paid attention to it, and so there were some schools that were very strict about that, and other schools that were less strict about that. So I thought it was important that we have a policy. In working with our attorney, in looking at other models, what you have before you was drafted by our attorney based on what he has seen in other districts. Again, this is a brand new policy. We have filed JFA. This is adding JFAA. And so in essence, there's documents that we are going to require of individuals to prove residency. So the first of all, the parents or guardians have to prove that they are who they are, ID and that such at the beginning. And then the traditional things, the proof of age, the immunization records as were required. There's a new residency affidavit that you also have attached here along with the policy to make sure that the families confirm that they understand why or how they're able to reside or enroll because of residency. And then it asks for proof of residency and proof of occupancy. So for residency, it's one of 3 items. It's a current mortgage statement. It's an original current lease signed by the property owner, management company, and tenant. Has to include the names of the occupants, or a property deed. So one of those 3 things, again, should have started off by saying, if you are school choice, we already know you're not residing here, so we're not looking at this policy. If you're homeless, then that we know you don't have a permanent home, so if you are dealing with housing insecurity, then you're not going to have to adhere to this policy. So it's not true. Ultimately, when you gain residence, you will adhere to this policy, but there are school choice and homelessness are examples of why this wouldn't apply. So the first is proving residency, i.e. You own that place. And then the second is occupancy, so something that shows an active residency there. So a current electric bill, current gas bill, cable internet bill, home telephone bill, who has one of those? Residential water or sewer bill, property tax bill, and then if you choose this, you have to have all 3, car registration, insurance, and excise tax bill. So again, the original draft of the policy from our attorney didn't have a couple of those items we added, and it was asking for 2 it was 1 from the first list and 2 from this second list. We adjusted it, felt like 1 was enough. If we can, again, it's more than we're doing now. That's still a vast improvement, and so it does allow discretion as well. So if there's someone who may not be technically homeless, but is living in a parent's home or if family members home and they can't prove ownership, then they can contact me. We'll work with them to make sure that if they are truly residing, then absolutely, we're going to let them into our schools. We want them here. But, certainly we've spent quite a bit of money over the years working with a private investigator when we have a sense that someone is not residing in our towns and attending our schools illegally, particularly when they live over the New Hampshire border, right? Being any of the towns across the southern New Hampshire border deal with this. So I'm proposing this, and this went through the policy subcommittee as a recommended brand new policy, and this would be put into action immediately as we're going through the registration process with, kindergarten and preschool. Should say another thing it mentions here is periodic rechecking. So we haven't confirmed. Our attorney did confirm there are districts that redo this every few years. Families are required to reprove residency. We talked about maybe twice on entry at the elementary level, and then maybe during one of the transitions, whether it's to the middle school or to the high school, reproving residency. But at this point, it's going to be for all new families who are registering their students in the Triton schools. And again, as we mentioned with the last one, if you'd be willing to do this as a first and second final approval, that would be awesome on timelines. If you don't feel comfortable, we certainly can make sure it happens in June if we have to bring it back to the May meeting.
Does anybody have any questions? And I have a motion to approve the changes to policy JFAA as recommended by the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee as a first and final reading.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? A roll call vote. Paul Lees?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Marissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well.
Can I just say, I know one of the discussions that was had by the policy subcommittee, there's no spirit or intention that we're cold and calculating in this, right? That is not the purpose. Every student that is our student, we want them here, but we also have to make sure we're being protected so that there are students who should not be in our schools and are not in our schools. So, and also just to confirm, with the online registration process through Aspen, everything will be digital, uploads, scans, you name it. This will be the one piece that remains in person. So after a family registers and that ends up in a queue with our administrative assistants in the school in the school offices, they'll get a follow-up message that says, and we need you to bring this information directly to the school originals so we can make copies.
Okay. Subcommittee reports, Policy and Advocacy, Paul Goldner.
I think we voted on a lot of things we've been doing the last couple of months in policy and advocacy. We're currently scheduled to meet on May 17th at 5:30. However, since the superintendent will not be here that day, we may move the meeting to a week earlier also if there's any policies we're going to address. That way we can get them on the agenda for the 17th.
Finance, Paul Mayette.
Our most recent meeting was mostly focused on the audit, and I just want to take a minute to say I think it's really easy for us to take for granted that these things are going to go well, because that should be the expectation in any town and any district, but it obviously isn't, and I just wanted to take a moment to show my appreciation that the way everything is run there, and that really takes a load off of everything that happens in the district. So thank you for that. Spending wise, as it has been tight, but we're going to make it without E&D and all of that as the end of the year goes.
Personnel and Negotiations, Paul Lees.
We have been meeting with the TRTA Unit A and B and continuing negotiations, and we have an executive session tonight to bring the full committee up to speed on where we are.
And the next item is the executive session. The committee is expected to go into executive session for purpose 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with union personnel, specifically the TRTA Units A and B. If the chair determines that discussions in an open meeting have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the district, to return to open session. Can I have a motion to go into executive session for purpose 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with union personnel, specifically the TRTA Units A and B, if the chair determines that discussions in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the district, to return to open session?
Can I just say, I believe legally you're supposed to say, because I have determined, since we're in the meeting.
Okay, I wrote it incorrectly. Because,
The way it's written in the agenda is, if you do, in the moment legally, I've been in other
had
meetings.
a long day.
I understand, science is hard.
I wrote it verbatim. I apologize. I determine that discussions in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the district, to return to open session.
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
We have to have a roll call vote. Paul Lees?
Yes?
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. So we're going to go to meeting.
We're going to do Unit B first or Unit A first? Because
Okay, we are returning to open session where I will pass it to Paul Lees.
Not really. So we have concluded our discussions in the executive session about the contracts that have been proposed and negotiated on TRTA Unit A and Unit B. And we have, we're going to propose a vote on the TRTA Unit B contract. And I would like to make the motion that we accept the contract between the Triton Regional School District and the TRTA Unit B as written.
Jessica, do you want to just give a quick summary of the,
Before we vote it?
generally, we've done that.
Okay. And so,
Second first and then go to discussion.
thank you.
Second.
Any discussion?
I was just going to reiterate what Brian said, just a brief explanation of what Unit B is so that the public understands.
And so I'm not going to go through line and verse the contract, but I am going to talk about the compensation. When we began speaking with the Unit B, the IAs, instructional assistants, there was significant concern by them about their level of compensation, and Brian did a review of surrounding locales, and we all agreed in the negotiation and in the discussion among the P&N Personnel and Negotiation Subcommittee that it was not in keeping with industry standards around us, so we agreed to a collapsing of some steps, an increase of 1% in the first year, and a net result of a COLA of 3% for each year thereafter for Unit B. And there were other relatively minor provisions that have been agreed to that are stated in the contract. Does anybody else have any further questions? No. All in favor? Roll call vote?
Yes. Paul Lees?
Yes.
Erin?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Matt Landers?
Yes.
Narissa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
I want to talk now about
I was just making, they can stay, they just can't vote.
okay, so now we're going to discuss the TRTA Unit A contract. And so this actually stems from the earlier contract 3 years ago, and there was a memorandum of understanding put together with tentative agreements on essentially 7 pages of different issues. This document will be available upon request to the central office. It is typically not posted, but it really works out the nitty-gritty between the old contract and the new contract. The compensation, which is of primary importance to most everyone, is set forth so that the agreement in the contract calls for a 2.5% raise in the first year, with an increase of 0.5% on the last day of the first contractual year, and then a 3% increase, COLA increase in the second year, and a 3% increase in the COLA for the third and final year. So the net result is basically a 3, 3, and 3, but the last 0.5% is not paid until the last day of the contract for the first year. And I just want to make a statement more on my own about the move to 3, 3, and 3 in both the TRTA Unit A and Unit B contracts. And I want the public to understand that this is really more a function of what has gone on around in many of the school districts around us and communities that go on strike, and the harm that causes not only to the children, but to the administrators, but to the teachers as well, and how that can really backtrack students in their growth and their learning. So I'm hopeful that after this next contract, we get 3 years out, we can return to the more typical levels of COLAs in the range of 2% or slightly above that for, specific instances of items that are negotiated in the contract. So I'm done with my opinion on that. I just wanted to put it out there publicly so that hopefully later people that are negotiating contractors may recall this. negotiating contracts in the future may recall this. So I would like to make a motion that we adopt the contract that has been reviewed in executive session for the TRTA Unit A, which identifies a compensation of 2.5% for the first year with a 0.5% increase on the last day, and then a 3-year COLA on the second and third years.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Roll call vote, Paul Lees,
Yes?
Erin,
Abstain.
Susanna,
Yes.
Paul Mayette,
Yes.
Paul Goldner,
Abstain.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Nat Landers,
Yes.
Narissa,
I abstain.
and I'm a yes as well. So I want to thank everybody for the work that you've done on those contracts. I know it was a long, hard discussion with our bargaining units. As I always say, it takes a village, and everything that we do takes all of us.
Never says that.
So I want to thank you all, and have a good night.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Can I just add too, like, I think, you know, we need to also thank the union representatives for coming in good faith, and also
Yep.
Christine Nealand, who was the municipal representative from the Raleigh Select Board, because I know this has been long, long hours just from, you know, the time that I've seen with meetings posted and whatnot. And I think it's a phenomenal investment for the good of our students, and, you know, deserves to be recognized.
And thanking Brian, too, for being in those negotiations.
I assumed he was in.
So can I just backtrack on that? And so all the negotiations that took place between both units were very professional, very open, great individuals in both panels, very thankful for what they did. Sarah Scruton was a true leader in terms of how this all came together, very thankful for everything that they did, as well as the administration, keeping us well advised of, you know, side issues like coaches' evaluation and teachers' evaluation. Those were done in working groups and then brought to us at the last minute, and so a lot of work done by those people. And just want to share that with you.
Again, takes a village. Okay, have a night. Oh, sorry, I almost said it again. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second it.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, Paul Lees,
Yes?
Erin,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Paul Mayette,
Yes.
Paul Goldner,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Nat Landers,
Yes.
Narissa.
Yes?
I'm a yes as well. Thank you. Have a nice night.